Intel CPUs feel confusing because their names don't tell a clear story anymore. So instead of jumping between Core i3 and Core i9, we're going year by year from the very first Intel processor to the ones powering modern PCs today. Once you see the order, everything finally makes sense. Intel 4004. In 1971, Intel released something so small and unassuming that almost no one noticed it at the time. The Intel 4004 wasn't built for computers. It was designed for calculators. And yet, it quietly became the most important processor ever made. The 4004 was a 4-bit microprocessor, running at just 740 kHz with only 2,300 transistors. By today's standards, that's nothing. But what made it revolutionary wasn't its speed. It was the idea behind it. For the first time in history, an entire central processing unit existed on a single chip. Logic, control, this proved that programmable intelligence could be compact, scalable, and mass-produced. Every CPU that followed exists because this one proved it was possible. Intel 8086 and 8088. By the late 1970s, computing was no longer just about calculators. Businesses wanted real machines that could handle serious work. In 1978, Intel answered with the 8086. This chip introduced something that would quietly dominate computing for decades: the x86 instruction set. It was a 16-bit processor, far more capable than anything Intel had built before. But the real turning point came a year later, in 1979, with a slightly modified version called the 8088. Technically, the 8088 was weaker. It used a narrower data bus, but it was cheaper, simpler, and easier to integrate. That's why IBM chose it for the original IBM PC. That single decision locked the PC industry onto x86. Software, hardware, and entire ecosystems formed around it. From that moment on, Intel wasn't just making CPUs, it was defining the future of personal computing. Intel 386. In 1985, Intel released a processor that finally made personal computers feel powerful instead of fragile. The Intel 386 wasn't just an upgrade, it was a fundamental leap forward. This was Intel's first 32-bit processor, which meant computers could suddenly address far more memory than before. But the real breakthrough wasn't speed, it was control. The 386 introduced protected mode, allowing the system to isolate memory between programs. Before this, one crashing application could take down the entire computer. With the 386, true multitasking became possible. Multiple programs could run at the same time without stepping on each other. That balance between innovation and compatibility helped the PC platform grow instead of fracture. The 386 laid the groundwork for modern operating systems and pushed PCs firmly into the professional world. Intel 486. By 1989, personal computers were becoming more common, but they still felt slow and inefficient. The Intel 486 changed that by refining everything the 386 introduced. For the first time, Intel integrated key components directly onto the processor itself. The 486 included on-chip cache and an integrated floating point unit, which meant the CPU no longer had to constantly reach outside itself for critical calculations. The result was a massive real-world performance boost. Programs loaded faster, calculations felt instant, and everyday tasks stopped feeling like a test of patience. The 486 also improved power efficiency and reliability, making systems more stable and predictable. In many ways, the 486 was the bridge between early computing and the modern PC experience. Not flashy, but foundational. Pentium. In 1993, Intel released a processor that didn't just improve performance, it changed how people talked about computers. This was the birth of Pentium. For the first time, a CPU had a name that sounded powerful and memorable. But Pentium wasn't just branding. Architecturally, it introduced a superscalar design. Computers suddenly felt smoother instead of hesitant. Everyday tasks became faster. Games ran better. Software stopped feeling like it was constantly catching its breath. Pentium also marked the moment when PCs entered mainstream homes. Offices, schools, and families adopted computers at scale, and Pentium became synonymous with a fast computer. There were flaws, like the infamous FDiv bug, but it didn't slow Pentium's momentum. This processor didn't just power machines, It powered the explosion of personal computing in the 1990s. Pentium Pro. By 1995, personal computers were no longer the most demanding machines in the room. Servers and workstations were beginning to shoulder heavier loads, and Intel needed a processor built for that world. The answer was the Pentium Pro. This chip wasn't designed for everyday home users. It was aimed squarely at professionals running databases, engineering software, and enterprise systems. What made Pentium Pro special was its introduction of out-of-order execution, allowing the CPU to rearrange instructions internally to work more efficiently instead of waiting on slower tasks. In real terms, this meant better performance on complex workloads, even if clock speeds didn't look impressive on paper. The Pentium Pro became the architectural foundation for many future Intel designs. It was Intel thinking long-term, less about marketing numbers, more about how processors actually work under pressure. Pentium II. In 1997, Intel introduced the Pentium II, a processor designed to bring high-end performance to everyday desktop users. While Pentium Pro focused on workstations, Pentium II adapted those advanced ideas for the mainstream. Pentium II improved instruction handling, cache performance, and overall system responsiveness. Intel also added MMX instructions, which were specifically designed to accelerate multimedia tasks like video playback, audio processing, and early graphics workloads. This mattered as PCs were becoming entertainment machines, not just work tools. Its unusual cartridge-style design made it stand out physically, but more importantly, it made computers feel faster and smoother for normal users. Web browsing, office software, and games all benefited. Pentium II powered the late 1990s PC boom and helped solidify Intel's dominance in consumer desktops during that era. Celeron and Xeon. In 1998, Intel made a decisive move by splitting its processor lineup in two very different directions. This was the year Celeron and Xeon were introduced. Celeron was built for affordability. It stripped away large caches and high-end features to create a processor suitable for basic tasks like documents, email, and web browsing. Schools, offices, and families adopted it quickly because it was cheap and good enough. At the opposite end, Intel launched Xeon. These processors were designed for servers and workstations that needed reliability, large memory support, and non-stop operation. Xeon chips supported features like ECC memory and multi-CPU systems, making them ideal for enterprise workloads. With this split, Intel clearly defined three markets: budget users, mainstream consumers, and professionals. That structure still shapes Intel's lineup today. Pentium III. In 1999, Intel released the Pentium III, refining the Pentium II design and pushing PCs deeper into the multimedia age. This processor introduced SSE instructions, which significantly improved performance in 3D graphics, scientific calculations, and early gaming engines. For users, this meant smoother visuals, better frame rates, and faster handling of complex data. Pentium III systems became popular in homes, offices, and gaming setups as the internet expanded and software grew more demanding. Pentium III also played a key role in the rise of early online gaming and multimedia applications. It wasn't a dramatic architectural leap. By the turn of the millennium, Pentium III represented the peak of Intel's classic Pentium era, stable, fast, and widely trusted by both consumers and professionals. Pentium IV. Pentium IV was launched by Intel in 2000, marking the start of what became known as the GHz Race. This processor was built on the NetBurst architecture, designed to push clock speeds higher than ever before. On paper, it looked like the future. Clock speeds quickly climbed past 3 GHz, something no consumer CPU had reached before, but this focus on raw frequency came with a cost. Pentium IV consumed large amounts of power, produced excessive heat, systems ran hot, loud, and inefficient. While Pentium IV sold well due to aggressive marketing, it exposed a hard truth. Higher clock speed alone does not guarantee better performance. This realization forced Intel to rethink its entire design philosophy, setting the stage for a major architectural reset in the years that followed. Pentium M. While Pentium IV was struggling with heat and power, Intel quietly released a processor in 2003 that would change everything. Pentium M. Designed specifically for laptops, Pentium M abandoned the GHz race entirely. Instead of chasing clock speed, it focused on performance per watt. It ran cooler, used far less power, and often outperformed Pentium IV chips running at much higher frequencies. This processor proved a critical point. Efficiency mattered more than raw speed. Laptops became thinner, quieter, and finally practical for everyday use. Battery life improved dramatically, and mobile computing started to make real sense. Pentium M didn't dominate marketing headlines, but internally, Intel knew it had found the future. Its design philosophy became the foundation for Intel's next major CPU family, effectively ending the netburst era and redefining how modern processors would be built. Core and Core 2 Duo. Intel made a clean break from the past with the launch of the Core architecture and Core 2 Duo processors in 2006. This wasn't a small improvement. It was a complete reset. Built on the efficiency lessons learned from Pentium M, Core 2 Duo delivered far better performance per watt than Pentium IV ever could. Systems ran cooler, quieter, and significantly faster in real-world tasks. Instead of relying on raw clock speed, Intel focused on smarter execution, shorter pipelines, and better use of each clock cycle. For users, the difference was immediate. Multitasking became smoother, applications launched faster, and laptops finally felt powerful without sounding like jet engines. Core 2 Duo restored Intel's performance leadership and redefined modern CPU design. This architecture became the blueprint for nearly every Intel processor that followed. Core 2 Quad. In 2007, Intel took the next logical step by bringing quad-core processors to the mainstream with Core 2 Quad. Instead of making one massive chip, Intel combined two dual-core dies into a single package, instantly doubling core count for consumers. For the first time, everyday PCs could handle serious multitasking without slowing down. Video editing, rendering, and running multiple applications at once became practical instead of painful. Gamers and content creators quickly embraced the extra power. Core 2 Quad also marked a shift in how performance was measured. Speed was no longer just about clock frequency. It was about how much work a processor could handle at the same time. This generation proved that multi-core computing wasn't just for servers anymore. It was the moment when parallel processing became a standard expectation for consumer CPUs, setting the stage for everything that followed. Core i7 and Atom. In 2008, Intel introduced two processors that targeted completely opposite ends of the market: Core i7 and Atom. Core i7 launched with the Nehalem architecture and redefined high-performance computing for consumers. It added features like integrated memory controllers and hyperthreading, allowing CPUs to handle many tasks at once with ease. Gaming, content creation, and heavy multitasking became far more fluid. At the same time, Intel released Atom, a processor built for extreme power efficiency. Atom powered netbooks, kiosks, and embedded systems where battery life mattered more than speed. It was small, cool, and inexpensive, but very limited in performance. Together, these two launches showed Intel's expanding strategy, delivering both maximum power and ultra-low consumption within the same year. Core i5. In 2009, Intel released the Core i5, and it quickly became the backbone of the PC market. Positioned between the i3 and i7, the i5 offered the best balance of performance and price for most users. Core i5 processors delivered strong single-core performance, solid multitasking ability, and enough power for gaming, content creation, and everyday workloads. Features like Turbo Boost allowed the CPU to increase speed dynamically when needed, improving responsiveness without excessive power use. For gamers, i5 chips became the default choice, pairing well with mid-range graphics cards. For students and professionals, they provided years of reliable performance without overspending. Not the cheapest, not the most powerful, but the one that made the most sense for the majority of people. Core i3. In 2010, Intel introduced the Core i3, completing the Core lineup and redefining what entry-level performance looked like. Unlike older budget processors, Core i3 wasn't about cutting corners everywhere. It was about delivering a smooth, reliable experience for everyday computing. Core i3 processors brought modern features like integrated graphics and efficient multitasking to affordable systems. Browsing the web, streaming video, working on documents, and running multiple apps at once became comfortable instead of frustrating. For students, offices, and home users, i3 systems finally felt responsive. What made Core i3 especially important was longevity. Each new generation became significantly faster. This shattered the myth that lower-tier CPUs were automatically weak and proved that generation mattered just as much as branding. Core i9. In 2017, Intel introduced the Core i9, a processor line created for users who demanded extreme performance. This wasn't meant for everyday computing. Core i9 was built to handle workloads that pushed CPUs to their limits. With dramatically higher core counts and aggressive boost clocks, Core i9 made heavy multitasking feel effortless. Tasks like 4K video editing, large-scale 3D rendering, running virtual machines, and streaming while gaming could all happen at the same time without choking the system. But this power came with trade-offs. Core i9 chips consumed more power, generated more heat, and carried premium price tags. Core i9 existed to push boundaries, not to be practical. It represented Intel's answer to rising competition and the growing demand for workstation-level power in consumer desktops. Core Ultra. In 2023, Intel marked a turning point with the launch of Core Ultra processors. For the first time in over a decade, Intel dropped the familiar Core i naming and introduced a completely new direction for its CPUs. Core Ultra was built on a chiplet-based design, meaning the processor was no longer a single monolithic block. Instead, different parts handled compute, graphics, and input-output separately, improving efficiency and flexibility. The most important addition was the NPU, or Neural Processing Unit. The NPU was designed specifically for AI tasks, things like background blur in video calls, real-time image enhancement, and AI-powered creative tools could now run without heavily taxing the CPU or GPU. This allowed laptops to stay cooler and last longer on battery. Core Ultra wasn't just faster. It signaled Intel's shift toward an AI-focused future, where intelligence is built directly into the processor itself. When you look at Intel's processors out of order, the lineup feels chaotic. Names repeat, meanings shift, and it's easy to assume newer always means better. But seen year by year, a clear pattern emerges. Every Intel processor exists because the one before it hit a limit. The 4004 proved CPUs could exist on a chip. The 8086 locked in x86. Pentium chased performance. Pentium IV showed the danger of chasing speed alone. Core proved efficiency wins, and Core Ultra marks the move toward AI-first computing. This isn't just a list of processors. It's a timeline of problems, solutions, and trade-offs that shaped modern computers. Once you understand that progression, choosing the right CPU stops being confusing and starts being logical.